Okay. All right. Okay. So a couple of announcements. The registration is open for the Extension Master Gardener Coordinators Conference, and I think, Mike, you're going to talk about that at the very end of the webinar. So that's coming up in August in Madison, Wisconsin. I've been talking to a lot of folks about Madison, and I'm hearing great things. So I'm excited to go there this year. Another announcement is our previous discussion, which was last month, is now archived online, and so you can find that in the chat box. I've put a few links that parallel what we're going to talk about with these announcements. So you've got a link to the Coordinators Conference, a link to the February discussion. I am working with a travel company to host a Master Gardener training trip to Cuba in November of this year. And if you're interested in joining us, we're welcoming anyone that wants to come on the trip. It's very intensive training, lots of activities, and a pretty impressive itinerary. And so that link to the Cuba travel is in the chat box too. And then I also put in the chat box an upcoming pollinator webinar from Oregon State University. So for me, this is super early in the morning, but I did note that the webinar will be recorded. And I thought it was a good topic that Master Gardener coordinators and even volunteers may be interested in. So the topic is pesticides, people, and pollinators, answers to tricky pesticide questions for Master Gardeners. I just wanted to alert you all that that webinar is coming up on April 12th. And it looks like it may be a good one. And then lastly, if you have any announcements, you can email those to John Orrick, and he'll put those in the e-news blast that goes out. All right, and our upcoming presentations, we have John Freeborn and Devin Johnson talking in April about the Virginia Extension Master Gardener Communication Survey results. That will be an excellent webinar. In May, we have Jeffrey Choate, who is going to speak about how he created a revenue enhancement online training option that will teach different horticulture proficiencies, and it's in addition to his Master Gardener training. So if anyone's thinking about advanced trainings and some kind of an online hybrid, definitely listen to that webinar. And then Sheri, who's on the call today, will join us again in June for the motivation survey results. All right, so if you all could let us know what state you're from in the chat box. And I'm Nicole Pinson from Florida. Oh, Anne from Florida, Minnesota, California. Bet California is nice right now. Washington, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. Ooh, it's snowing in Virginia. All right, so we got folks from all over the place. And I've noticed in the chat box too that John has put a link to the latest e-news blast. So thank you for doing that, John. All right, so I see that we've got folks from all over. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Mike and Sheri, you guys ready?
Sure am.
Okay.
So as we are warming up here and as we're introducing, I just want to say there's been a lot of people who have been involved in this project in many different ways over the year or more we've been working on it. So I would like to keep going with the chat box, and if you have been involved with this project in any way, please chime in. Let me know who you are, where you're from, and what your role was. Because I know there's been people who've been helping with the sausage making to all the way to participating and using the tools to providing feedback. So if you've been involved in it, let me know. And I'm going to let that go. And while that's populating, I'm going to talk about this. Now, I've got the chat box right in my middle here. Nicole, can I move it?
Yep. Just pick it up and move it.
Right. I'm a Zoom infant, so excuse me. So Sheri and I will be tag teaming this today, and we'll see where it gets. But we are really providing an update on the work we've been doing as the Extension Master Gardener Work Group on Impact and Evaluation. Let me try to advance the slide. How do I advance this? So now that infancy is showing, I need to advance the slide.
Okay, you should see an arrow on the bottom left-hand corner.
It's so faint. I got it now.
Yep, there you go.
So This story could start in many different places, but I'm choosing to start the story in New Jersey. I'm doing that because that's where I became involved, and I think any story that starts with "it started in New Jersey" is right up there with "Once Upon a Time," and it's got to be a good story. So this story started in New Jersey, and particularly at the 2014 EMG conference that was hosted by Rutgers. From this came the effort of updating the national EMG report that is online, that was last done in 2009, and we wanted to get a new updated version. So we were beginning to collect the data from 2014 and provide some sort of a national summary, and probably most every one of you have seen this at some point in time. We had 38 out of the 49 states with program reporting. We had huge amounts of numbers that came out of it. We were all super proud. I think we threw our arms out patting ourselves on the back for this effort. And based on the effort, I had volunteered to be part of the EMG committee, and I was so excited from it that I wanted to be part of the work group that would advance this moving forward, because there were some hiccups pulling it together, as well as there could have been more. So lo and behold, then I got involved and started pursuing what can we do for moving forward with impact and evaluation, talking about what's the purpose of the Master Gardener program, what difference we're making. I happened to be at the NEROC meeting that in Philly that year, and that was the National Extension Ag Research and Administration Conference. It's where all our bean counters go for their professional development. And I was standing in the buffet line next to Lynn Kadiagala. Sorry if I butcher that, Lynn. I have trouble with it, but she's a USDA evaluation specialist, and she and I were chatting and waiting to get our egg rolls. And I was telling her about our latest effort, and she, to paraphrase, said, "We have room for improvement." We have a lot of hours that are being collected, but what is the impact that we're making? Are we capturing that and explaining it? And it was in this conversation through the buffet line and in the hours after it that it emerged that there was more we can get from the data we're collecting. And we will be referring to this as context and conditions. Context being, what specifically do these hours mean? We have millions of hours collected, but doing what? And the conditions part we will refer to as, are we actually making changes in the communities where Master Gardeners involved? So context and conditions, what do these numbers mean, and are we actually making change? So in the conversations with Lynn, and as all you know, I can't see white on white on the slide.
Try your page down, see if that'll work for you. There you go. There you go.
Okay. So in all these conversations with Lynn, and wanting to tell the story, we were trying to decide what would be the easiest story to tell. And for those of us involved with Master Gardeners, we know Master Gardeners are involved in a lot of things in our communities, making a difference. But Lynn suggested we start with the issue of food security and Master Gardeners' involvement in community garden and all those other efforts. We felt it was a logical place. There's a lot of momentum and curiosity about it from all our stakeholders. Plus, it's something we have a history doing, and there's stuff already going on. In that 2014 report, we began to collect pounds of food that were collected. Many of us have a history of working in community gardens. And there's also, like I said, ongoing efforts, like with the sign here from Iowa. They have already been pursuing some of these efforts. And so we thought we'd tap into some of the momentum we already have in place and pull something together. Next slide. All right, so this story then continues to evolve, and it now takes us to the 2016 conference in Montana. For those of us who were there, we brought this up as an opportunity as part of that conference in order for us to get better data, talk about context, talk about the conditions that are changing because of the presence of master gardeners. And we got a lot of really good initial feedback and some momentum that came out of that conference. But probably one of the other things that came out of it was standing in line to the bar. Terry James comes up to me and goes, have you thought about signing up for the E-Extension Impact Collaborative? Let's submit to that. So if we go to the next slide, we did submit to go to Detroit, and for Terry James from Nebraska, Susan DeBleek from Iowa State, and myself, it was a really great opportunity to have 48 hours devoted to working on a project, face-to-face, without the distractions that come with everything else in our jobs, as well as in a room of specialists to answer any of our questions that we may have. What was also really great is we set this up to have a number of state coordinators on standby, either by email or phone. So if we had questions, we were able to get responses immediately. And this is where a lot of this program and our efforts was birthed. And this is also where the line of comparing apples to oranges, though not original by any means, but that's where we first started applying it here. Because in our data dive on what's existing, this is where we would found there was a lot of efforts being done on this already. But probably the best example of apples and oranges, state collecting the number of youth in gardens as their unit, compared to another state that was collecting the number of gardens with youth. Again, we're both in the ballpark, but you can't take those numbers and combine them in order to have some sort of impact. So that's just like one example of something that we had found. So next slide there. So again, coming out of that and addressing the whole conversation of context and conditions and phone calls with everyone, including Lynn from the USDA, we decided that we wanted to focus on, for the context and those numbers that we're collecting, how many pounds of produce that were donated or gleaned through Master Gardener efforts, get a better idea of the number of Master Gardener volunteers and their hours and continuing ed that were related to these numbers we're collecting, as well as start to the demographics of the people and the lives that we're touching in these projects. So the number of youth, the number of adult, and were they low income or income eligible populations that many of our SNAP Ed colleagues work with. The other piece that we found to be really critical to collect to give it the real context of where this work was being done was some sort of geographic location, particularly the county that this work was being done in. Many times we have collected things and reported them at the state level, and so we would know a state is doing something, but where something going on within the state is just as important. Is it an urban area? Is it a rural area? You know, a lot of times stakeholders are going to want to know exactly where this work is going to be. So for our context, we were looking at these points.
So that takes us to the other C that Mike suggested, our conditions. And what we wanted to do was put these numbers into a meaning. You know, what are we really doing, and what are we changing, and what are other people doing because we're there, because this Master Gardener resource is there. So we began to ask questions about, you know, how does what we're doing fit up with some of the big data that we have access to? You know, how does the Master Gardener presence make a difference in terms of the food stream, the access to fresh fruits and vegetables? How do we compare to food deserts? How do we compare to property values? You know, going back to some of those research-based outcomes of community gardens and food-related projects. So we were really beginning to ask a lot of questions. We still have a lot of questions, but we're trying to take what we know Master Gardeners are doing, that context, and put it into that bigger story.
All right. So through this conversations, we then decided we needed to give some instruction for colleagues to collect this data. And we wanted to come up with a simple instrument that they can use in order to prepare for their season and get the numbers that we need. And so we came up with this worksheet, which, I show it to you now and you're thinking, why did it take you so long just to come up with this worksheet? Trying to figure out what people are doing across the nation in all the different ways and finding a way that could be so this can be done with the minimum burden put on county colleagues. It took a lot of thought and a lot of effort to what can we do that's simple, or the simplest way we can do different things. So we put together this worksheet with the intention that if individuals just chose one thing they did or one garden they worked in and collected this data, it'd give us more than what we have now. We tried to color code it to recognize the different levels of burden that could be in place. If we could just get an idea from one workshop or one garden, the number of adults that were participating in the Master Gardener efforts involved, that was a good enough. But if we could take it a step further and recognize the little more burden that went on to with like collecting the pounds of produce and the audience demographics, it's one step better and giving us more information about that project than what we had before. So again, this was an idea. It was a worksheet that people can customize. And even if they chose one thing, it's more than what we have now. But there was room for them to go hog wild with it if they so chose.
Iowa and Wisconsin.
Hey, we'll talk about that in a minute. So I'm basically, next slide, please, for whoever can see that. All right. All right. So, and Sheri, I'll let you talk about this collection tool.
Sure. So we had this great worksheet that Mike put together, and then we started, at one of our meetings, we're trying to figure out how do we get this information from people. Remember, we're talking to 49 Master Gardener programs across the United States, and we just want to hear, just one project. We'd be happy. We dreamed of one project per state, giving us some data. So we kicked around a bunch of different ideas, and ultimately we had access to Qualtrics. So we created an online survey type document or tool rather, and we sent this out. And Mike was really concerned about being in your inbox all the time, hounding you for that information, for that data. But we know that it takes a couple of prompts to get that message out, get people familiar with what we're doing, why we're asking for this, and to get people to answer the question. So there it is, our fabulous Qualtrics tool.
Next slide. And we wanted to really get the word about it. As Sheri said, we wanted to be present in your inboxes and on your screens to know that this was going on. And so through the course of the year, through the e-news blast that John sends out, or the Facebook page that's been emerging for the conference, listserv emails, meetings at the different conferences we've had, coffee and lunches together just to promote it. We've really tried to get the word out on it. And there was challenges with that and with the timing. Our gardening season in the north ended much earlier than the gardening season ended in the south. So there were some hiccups that went along that we discovered as we went along, and we kept pushing the deadline out, recognizing, well, stuff's still growing down there. So finally, we did have to draw the line, and we got some data in. So you should not see me in the near future regarding this in your inbox. It'll be for other things, but not this. So
next slide.
And ta-da, we got some initial data. And there's a couple things to be happy with here. Is we actually had the initial goal of 50 responses, thinking one garden from each state. It wasn't one per state, but we got our 50 responses, and some surprising responses from where they came from DC, from Massachusetts, where didn't even realize we had Master Gardeners there, but they responded. And we also got some pounds of produce, and we got some initial numbers. As well as Susan DeBleek was able to use GeoBatch in order to get some initial visualization on this. So, and this is one of the things, again, that we found really important, is where this work is occurring. So I just want to comment on some of that. You do see a broad distribution across the U.S. with a real big emphasis kind of in the Midwest. And what you're going to see in a couple slides is there's also another project we're doing in combination with our SNAP Ed colleagues that I think led to this results. The other thing that I think that is important to note at this point is we were really pushing for this to be data entered by the county colleagues. But for Susan and myself, we entered it as from our statewide position. So we had collected this data through our own reporting systems and we entered it. And there was pros and cons to doing that. But again, that's why I think you're seeing a lot of that concentration in the Iowa, Wisconsin, spilling over to Indiana and into Nebraska, because we've all also been working on another project together. But otherwise, the hours are there. Sheri, if there's anything you want to comment on, or chat box, if there's anything you see and want to respond to, please do.
And I want to add to what you're saying here, Mike. The team spent a lot of time talking about how would we visually present this. We've talked to folks about story maps. We've looked into different software packages, from Google Maps to ArcGIS software. I mean, we have really had a lot of conversations about this, again, trying to most effectively and efficiently present our data, tell that story, but not put undue burden on our contributors. And we're going to talk about this as we come along, but it's so much more enlightening to have it. Mike and Susan added information from the state level, but they kept it about the county site. And that's important for us to understand what's happening with our data, with our projects.
Let's go to the next slide, please. So it didn't end there. We also wanted to follow up with those who participated to do a little bit of quality control and learn how we can improve this process. So for the individuals who did participate in sending us data, we did a follow-up with them on a survey in order to find ways of making it less burdensome or a process improvement. Unfortunately, though, we only got 4 responses. So it's kind of hard to find trends with only such a low N number. But, there's a couple things, our purpose was clear among all 4 of them, but some of the other things could be improved. We need more there, but we recognize the process improvement for this whole thing is important. But this just kind of leads into some of the other observations that we saw as a result of this. So let's go to the next slide. And that is, what are some of the trends that we saw from doing this type of work? And I think Sheri and I both have comments on this, but I'm going to start with what we have here on the screen. And one is, you can't compare apples to oranges. And to quote Terry James, we're just happy to get all citrus in one bucket. And I think we achieved that with this initial attempt. We got people to report on the citrus they were growing. So we got them to give us the data on the pounds of produce. We got us to give us some data on the number of hours and number of master gardeners and the hours they put in. But now we need to take it to the next step of just sorting the citrus. Put the limes in one bucket, into one group, and the grapefruits in another bucket, and the lemons in a third. Because what we realized, even with what we thought was being specific, people found ways to report different things. For example, when we asked for pounds of produce, some people gave us an exact number. Other people gave us a range with a low and a high. We asked people to report for a geographic distribution. So some people gave us a county, some people gave us multi-counties. Some people gave us numbers, did not give us numbers. So it's a step in the right direction, but it's another step we've identified that we need to improve upon in the future, because if we're going to visualize this data later on, it needs to be cleaned up. So we got data this year. It was ugly data. We learned from it, and we're going to go forward with it, improve it next year. The other thing that I really observed is we only have carrots, we have no sticks. We really are trying to speak to people about what our intended outcomes for this project, get people to buy into what the results to be, and we really want to try to get people motivated to participate voluntarily in this program. Because I know here in Wisconsin, the line of authority between me and county educators is lightly dotted and gray-scaled. I can't make anybody do anything, let alone for me to go, hey, Indiana master gardeners, can you do this for me? Or you over here in another time zone, you don't even know who I am, you don't care, it's just another damn email from somebody you don't know. So that line of communication is even weaker. So we've got to find a way to, without any mandates or these lines of authority, to get this information collected. And again, I think it's just trying to build the camaraderie and influencing one another. Like, this is how we can work together to make a difference. Sheri, if there was more to add, or
Well said.
okay. So we're not done. This was only the first year in what we are thinking of a 5-year plan, which, full disclosure, I went into that Detroit workshop thinking we would have something for February. Wrong. It's taking so much more to herd everyone into doing this. But and plus we also have some other efforts going on. So a big thing that this work group does is the national report. So we are picking up the momentum from the 2014 report. The 2016 report would be out any hour now. You're going to see a glimpse of it in the next slide or two. And we're going to need to be doing the 2018 report at the end of this year to keep that data and that momentum going. But we still are wanting to continue with the food security pilot. You're going to be seeing more information coming out in the upcoming months about participating in this program. We're going to refine the instruments and tools, and we're going to hope to double the participation for 2019. At the same time, we're also going to be we're still going to be working on the food security conditions questions. This is turning to be a lot more complicated than we thought, just because there are so many options, but then there's also technological limitations that keep us from doing some of the things that we think cool ideas and possibilities. You know, we've looked at the garden calculator that Lucy Bradley has put together as a tool we could possibly use for some conditional change. We've explored cost savings that can happen with this, the number of calories that we can be introducing into an identified food stream, or other things like crime or that. You know, there's big data out there that we're just looking to see how this overlays. But it's proving to be a lot trickier than what we initially thought. We also are still holding a place in the back of our minds about future performance measure work that can be done. We know master gardeners are doing so many things, such as pollinator protection. We're hoping we can use what we learned through this process on food security and apply it to some other efforts that master gardeners are doing. And hopefully some of you can step in and help us with that when the timing is right, or start thinking about it and knowing that's the direction we're going. So we do have a larger plan of work in place, but again, for 2019, we want to double the state participation. We want to refine those performance measures for content, and we really need to establish what these conditions are that are related to the project. Next slide, please. And so what can this as a final product? Well, first of all, the picture on the left in the blue background, that is will be the latest update of the national report that'll be coming out. It's going to be on our EMG site very soon, so you can drill into the data and start to understand. We've got 43 of the 49 states participating this year, so this is great. But again, we need some more context to this data. So we're going to continue to push forward on it. The graphic on the other side of the screen, the one with the brown background, this is a snapshot from last year's work for those of us in kind of the north central region and our partnerships with SNAP Ed. So this begins to give you an idea of what we want to get to regarding, you know, the meat of who are we working with, what's the difference we're making, and we're getting a little bit of geography in there. But I think if we can go to the next slide, we're going to start to see what our final product will look like even more. This is using Tableau for some data visualization. And if you actually go to the website I have in the upper left-hand corner, you'll actually find this is an interactive site, and it'll allow you to manipulate the data in order to see some of the results that are there. Our vision for this project is within 5 years, nearly every county is filled in, and you can mouse over it and get an idea of the impact master gardeners are making in getting more food onto the tables of people who need it. And maybe even adding a layer on it even further, using case studies of specific gardens in each state on how that garden is making a difference in people's lives, so that when we have local stakeholders, local stakeholders, statewide stakeholders, or federal or national stakeholders come in, they can look at it and find data that's meaningful to them, as well as having our own master gardeners log on and see how they're nationally part of something bigger than themselves, and how that they are working as a group to make a difference. Next slide, please. So that then takes us to the point of what can you do? For those of you who did take part in this before, please step up again. And if you reported on one thing, next year report on 2 things. That's still more data than what we've had before. If you've not participated in the past, this next year, pick one project you do. Maybe it's one talk you give and the number of master gardeners involved and the number of people who attended. Or pick a garden you're working in and give us that data, including the pounds of produce. It doesn't need to be your whole portfolio of work, just one thing. If you can collect that data, and takes us a step further in getting this national impact recorded and shared with everybody involved. And the story doesn't end here. If we can take it to the next slide, please. As I said, this started in go back one, please. This started in New Jersey. It ended up in Montana. It had a sidetrack in Detroit, and we're going to continue this conversation in Wisconsin for the EMG conference. This idea began out of one of these. You have an option or an opportunity to come and take part in these conversations, contribute to the story, and help it carry on to the next location when that is announced. So I do want to continue encourage everybody to sign up. It's not just about getting to the conference and hanging out with me and everybody else, but we do make a difference at these things. And I think this is just one example of something that's come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, Sheri, any more you want to add? Otherwise, we can take some questions, hear some comments, and wrap things up.
I would just really echo what you're saying about the value of these national meetings. We really have had significant projects come out of the conversations and the meetings. And these special projects are really advancing the Master Gardener program on a national level, really strengthening us, giving the program some legs. So, hey, who knows what the next project will do for us. So I encourage all the state coordinators that are online with us today to encourage your local coordinators. Sometimes it takes nudging the administration to get permission and travel resources and so forth so those folks can get to these types of conferences, but just really important to be there.
Yeah. And at this conference, Terry James, you may not know this yet, but you'll be giving a presentation on it on Monday night. So your proposal that you submitted, it's getting its special slot as part of the EMG committee update on that evening. Because we will continue to talk about it because we need people involved. We need people to want to be involved. And that's the only way we're going to be able to get this done. So again, questions or comments?
Mike and Sheri, this is Nicole. First of all, I just want to say that everyone that worked on this team to start tracking these defined data points, that's a pretty big task, and we can see where you're making an effort. So we thank you guys for that. But I wanted to ask for the program planning worksheet, if someone is interested in, kind of working with the worksheet and sending some information to either you guys and or their local or state coordinator, is there a place where they might access that?
Yeah, so that worksheet that I showed you, as well as the drafts of the data visualization that we had on here, could all be available through that EMGFS stub website that I sent. So it's embedded in there.
I dropped it into the chat box earlier.
Yeah, it is a Google Doc. Feel free to make a copy of it and manipulate it to share. Otherwise, we haven't really talked about any changes to that. We're looking more at right now changes on the collection mechanism for the Qualtrics, as well as exploring ways to do better data visualization. I think Sheri made reference, we were doing a lot of meetings regarding data visualization, a lot with dead ends in the conversation. I think in 24 hours, we made more headway preparing for this talk and just asking the right questions to the right people who knew, like, well, I know how to do this. And so we've got to explore, what did we just do right now? It sounds strange, but that's what we have to do.
Yeah, and I think that points to the significance of these types of projects. Sometimes it does take a lot of conversation initially. We're trying on different, it's like trying on different pairs of shoes. You know, we're trying them out with these different visualization tools. And, you know, like you said, somebody just happened to help us out and gave us all new perspective on the process. And we do follow up and ask questions. We're very interested on the end users' experience and ideas to inform the process. I mean, this is new stuff. We're trying to figure it out. And as he said a couple times, we're trying to be sensitive to the burden you know, on people sharing their stories, sharing their information. So we're trying to be respectful, but also we want to get a, you know, tell a really compelling story.
And I have to say, I've seen some messages pop up, but just because of my view, I'm not able to go back and read them. So Nicole, if there's anything I need to answer, I would appreciate if you could read it, please.
Sure. So we have a question from Kirsten, and she's asking if there's a place where we can see state Master Gardener Program annual reports gathered on one site.
I think that is a great question, and maybe something we can add to our agenda for a conversation at our next meeting, because I think that would start to fall under the purview of this committee. Where that would be, I don't know for where it would be housed, but I think we can put out that request and see what we can do for that.
And I'll add to that, Mike, when we began working, Terry says they're on the Create site, on our e-extension site. And when we began working as a team in 2016, that was one of the very first things that we looked at. First of all, what is everybody saying already? What are they reporting and sharing already? Where can we begin? So if there's a state report out there, we want to know about it. And sometimes they're not in super logical places. So as Terry says, they are compiled on the Create site. We do have the, okay, so Terry says, Lucy's asked for, Terry, can you post the link for that site?
Oh, we'll get it to everybody. So we'll get that shared. Was there other questions or comments we need to address?
I don't see any others in the chat box right now, but I did think about the infographics that you all worked on, and I know you compiled data from many of our states, but I was just thinking that this would be easy to adapt, like for us in our own local or state programs, because it's a great visual representation of the work that we do, and you all have figured out some of the key components of the infographic, so I would just maybe encourage folks to create one for your own program that you can share with the public or with your stakeholders.
Yeah, and we're going to be going public with that graphic very soon. Natalie will be getting a message out to everyone and with some suggestions on how people can start sharing it locally with their different stakeholders. But yeah, it's going to be something that can be adapted easily for each state that is that has a program.
And I'm not sure if everyone saw, but Terry said that she will get the link to the Create site and she'll send it out to the list when she's back in the office.
Wonderful. So in case more questions come in, I want to just put out a huge appreciation to Lynn, who has been helping us with this project. She has provided some great guidance. I don't think we moved as fast on some things as what she's wanted us to, but It is what it is. When we're trying to do these things, I want to just really thank everyone who has been involved with this over the years of doing it. We had a great group of people who helped get this off the ground and get it going. We have had a dedicated group who have stepped up to help keep the momentum there. I feel we've got some new people who are coming on board to help us keep carrying it forward and keeping us with ground truthing it and helping us think ahead, what can we do for new things. We also have another group of people that are helping get this word out. So you're going to hear this again at the EMG conference. You're going to hear it again at the ASHS.
Yes.
We're trying to get the word out there to wherever we can. So if you want to pass the word on and help us rally folks to participate, we would really appreciate it. Because the more people who participate, the more that visual map is filled in and the more data we're collecting and the better story we're telling.
So are there any other questions for Mike or Sheri? Okay, so hearing none, I just wanted to let you all know we will record the webinar and it will be uploaded to our YouTube site. So I'll send that out once I get that finished after the webinar. And just as a reminder, you may join our extension.org community of practice. There's a two-step process. So I've received a lot of requests from people asking to join, or maybe they have colleagues that are interested. And this is where you would send them to set up an extension.org account. They can join our community of practice. And also if they leave, maybe they retire or they move on to a different position, this is how they would leave the community of practice. But signing up to this is where you'll get all the Extension Master Gardener updates, the e-news blast, the webinar discussions, the survey information that we're sending out, and the conference opportunities. So any questions or anything else before we take off? Nope. Okay, well, I want to say thank you to Mike and Sheri for presenting today and also for sharing those tools and all the hard work that you all are doing with the team to, try to compare apples to oranges. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to us again about this. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks everyone. Our next meeting is the third Wednesday of the month. So hope to see you then.
Take care.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.